we'll listen first to a brief excerpt of a talk by Swamiji for about 4 or 5 minutes.
It's very important to understand that the spiritual realm embraces the material. It isn't as if they were separated. When you give your life to God, the material flourishes. And if you live sincerely to God, God takes care of your material responsibilities too. But delusion tells us that if we take care of this and then seek God, then everything will work out. It isn't like that. Putting Him at the center, everything else flows well. So what he was saying to both Heber Kimball and to this nun was that if you put God first, but he didn't want to say that. It had to come from him. And so he put it to the nun very strongly, and he put it to the monk, just, it's up to you. And unfortunately, although the man did decide that was his way, in the end, ego came in and all those things. It's a part of the play of Maya. But remember, there is a certain austerity in this. And you do have to. I remember Master one time, his father said something derogatory about his guru, and my father said of all things, my guru said of all things, he said, physical birth is something, but divine birth is everything. If I ever hear you say one more word against my guru, I disown you forever as my father. Well, his father took care not to follow that anyway. You see, however, you've got to be that firm. It's only when you make a firm commitment that suddenly all the doors open. But as long as you're wishy-washy, as long as you're not sure, as long as you sort of think, well, I just want to be sweet and loving. No, there's a point. Then why do they call Swamis Maharaj? Sometimes justly, sometimes not so justly. But the reason is, as I've said before, if you are a king of your own self, and the beautiful thing is that when you're a king of yourself, you're a king of your environment. Whatever you decide, somehow it works for you. And I've seen that it works for you even in little ways, that when you need something, it is provided. I had an absolutely lovely experience years ago. I think I've told the story before, but it's well worth telling again. You know, every time, because my guru told me that my work was writing and lecturing, and every time I finished a major writing project, I always like to go off and celebrate with Divine Mother. That's my own little sentiment. And so I had finished this lesson, which is my Raja Yoga course. As you've seen now, it's a book available here in India today. But I felt very happy with this, and I said, Divine Mother, we must celebrate together. Well, I didn't have much money. And I went to Carmel, which is a lovely seaside resort, but I found that there were no rooms available. It was summertime. I hadn't thought about that. All the rooms were taken. The only room I could find was, it was available, but it cost a great deal more than I could afford. And I thought, well, I don't want to stay in some cheap place. I've come here to celebrate with you. And so I'll pay for this room, but you'll have to see that I have enough money to get home. And so I pulled out my wallet to pay this man. And he said, no, don't pay me. And I said, well, I'd rather pay you now, meaning I was afraid I wouldn't have it the next day. And he said, no, I don't want you to pay at all. And I said, well, what do you mean? Why not? He said, I don't know. I just like you. Well, that wasn't me. How many times have I been? How many times have you been to a hotel where they wouldn't let you pay because they liked you? No, it was Divine Mother. The next day I went to a restaurant. Somebody saw me there, the owner, who had perhaps, I think he'd seen me lecture once. Anyway, he came over and sat down, and he wouldn't let me pay for my lunch. My whole stay there was free. Why? Because I did it with Divine Mother. The more you celebrate life with God, the more you'll find God celebrates it with you. The more you do things with God, the more you'll find He does things with you.
Isn't that a wonderful talk by Swamiji? I remember when I first came onto the path, I I had read this statement, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. We know of other statements, like from Lahiri Mahashaya, if you bring God into the summer of your life, he'll be there in the winter. And then all time is wasted that's not spent seeking God. Different saints have said these things. This can wait, that can wait, but my search for God cannot wait. So when I heard that, I thought, that sounds wonderful, but that's impossible for me. I'm just not going to be able to do that. And then I read Autobiography of a Yogi. And I think Master wrote that book to inspire us to, of course, to go within. He inspired us with so many wonderful examples of the saints and the masters who put God first. And what happened to them in their ecstasy? They went beyond, they went above, they went into higher states of consciousness. They went above the difficulties of life. And I, and surely you, were certainly looking for that. And when I read about Giri Bala, for example, she hadn't eaten for 56 years when Master had met her. She was living from the prana, from the divine light. And Teresa Neumann, the Christian mystic as well. And Rama, who was raised from the dead. And Pranabananda, who had two bodies, and the levitating saint. He was so in ecstasy, he would just lift up. He was so in love with God and all the wonderful stories. I was so inspired, and I would look at the pictures of those saints and those masters, and something reminded me of a past life. That's who I am. I'm not these material things. I'm not this personality. I'm not this person of this color and this race, and I'm not this person. And it just so inspired me to get up and do something, to start seeking God. And if I couldn't seek God all the time, at least seek him somewhat. Then I had the great blessing of being with Swami Kriyanandaji. 35 years of my life, I was guided by Swami Kriyanandaji. I get to Ananda, he says first words to me, this is your home. You should think about living here. And I thought, he's trying to tell me, seek God first. Dhyana, seek God first. And I went through many ups and downs, trying to stay, then I didn't stay, then I left, then I came back. And nothing worked. Everything broke down, except for seeking God first. And Swamiji was such a big magnet. He was just drawing us into that kind of a life. He would have us meditating for hours, energizing, doing yoga. He wrote songs and wrote chants. We would chant those chants for hours. He would sing to us. He had a tanpura he'd bring out. He'd play that instrument nobody ever seen, that kind of instrument, a harmonium. And you were just getting so engrossed in this inner life. And the vibration that I felt then, I just couldn't live without it. The light, the feeling in my heart, the upward vibration of living above the materialistic pulls and desires and attachments. I couldn't live without it. And at first when I went there, I looked around and people, it was the hippie time. This was in the 70s. And people were wearing, everybody had on Indian clothing. This was up in California, in Northern California, the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And I was straight out of Los Angeles. And I said, everybody's wearing Indian clothes. I said, that's fake. It's got to be fake. And then everybody, all the men had long hair like Swamiji. Swamiji had thick glasses. He was wearing a dhoti. And he had long hair and a beard. And at first, I hadn't seen any people like those people before at Ananda. I just, this can't be true. They've just got to be faking it. There was like an Indian Satya Yuga village. It just was wonderful, but I just couldn't believe it. And then I kept looking in their eyes. I saw their level of energy. I saw how happy they were. I saw them meditating for hours on end, getting a harmonium, chanting for hours. Swamiji had us on the ground with doing fire ceremonies every week. he would do a strolling kirtan. He himself would go up, wake you up to get up in the morning and do yoga and meditate. He would go around chanting and with symbols, and I became a believer. I just thought, this is so sincere. This is real. That's not real. This is real. And as I started to do yoga myself, I felt so happy inside. I learned the chants myself. I went, wow, I'm going into the kingdom of God. It exists. It exists. And as I started practicing Kriya and I started the Om technique and Om Sa, and I got more energy and energization, and I just was so happy. And I thought, this was the missing link in my life. Seek God first. Go inside first. And everything will work out fine. And who doesn't have difficulties in their life? I had many a difficulty, but I kept seeking God first. And I remember the beautiful story of the Buddha. He was going out with his charioteer from the palace. He had never been out before. He was sheltered. Everybody looked young, all dyeing their hair to keep looking young. And, you know, his father just shielded him from all the outer experiences. So he would think everything is perfect. It's always wonderful all the time. And he snuck out with his charioteer. And he goes a little ways and he sees an old person. And he says, oh, brother, what's wrong with him? He's never even seen anybody looking like that. And he says, oh, my Lord, he's old. And he says, did everybody look like that? And he says, yes, my Lord, everyone turns old. And he just couldn't believe it. And then they went further and he sees someone who's lying down in pain and suffering, and he's ill. And he's never seen it before. He's been sheltered. And he asks the charioteer, he says, brother, what's wrong with him? He says, oh, my Lord, he's ill. He says, does everybody get ill? He says, yes, my Lord, everyone gets ill. And then he goes further and he sees a corpse. And he says, brother, what's wrong with him? And he says, oh, my Lord, he has died. And he says, is everybody? Siddhartha says, everybody die? He says, yes, my Lord, everyone. And people think, no, my life is fine. I just keep going out, out, out. These things happen to everyone. And the beautiful, another story of his life when the woman, her son had died. And she goes to him, he says, Lord, Lord, bring my son back to life. And he says, the only way I'm going to be able to do that is if you go to the home where no one in that home has seen death. Bring me mustard seeds from that home. And the woman, she was so encouraged. She went everywhere. She looked everywhere, all the homes. She came back empty-handed. She says, Lord, Lord, everyone is seeing death. And this is the story of our life. Everyone has those experiences. But the purpose is to go inside, not to keep looking for it outside. And going outside further and further. I remember when I was growing up, I was a teenager, and this thought came to me that anything you do or you go too far, it doesn't work out. And I remember, just humorously, I remember thinking, the more you eat, the fatter you get. And then the more you eat chocolate, your teeth start falling out. And these thoughts just came more and more in my mind. Maybe I was borderline on both of those. But I remember thinking, anything you do to extreme, it doesn't work. And you think about the things that people do. They think they're having fun. They're not having fun. Master said, you think you're having fun? You're not having fun. And I remember when we were growing up, we lived near Disneyland. So our parents would take us to Disneyland every year. I love Disneyland. I still love Disneyland. We'd go to Disneyland, and in the morning we'd be so fresh. We'd rush on all the rides. We'd get on everything we could, and then we'd, by the end of the day, oh God, I'm ready to go home. I mean, you just completely spent. How much entertainment can you have? You go into a candy shop, you take your kids, and how much candy can you eat? Really, you just can't go out that far. And then people think the same. They go out to a party and they're just partying all the time. I'm in a party, I look good, everybody's looking at me, I have the drinks. The next day, they've got a hangover. I remember next door, they had this big wedding just a couple of months back. That music was so loud. I just thought, that is way too loud. To balance our life. Emotions the same. People yell at somebody, they're cursing somebody else, and then they say, no, I'm a yogi. You're not a yogi. You have to pull your energy in. How do we do that? We do that through magnetizing the spine. God bless us that we're on a path, a spiritual path that works, that's true. Tried, true, tested, given by masters for thousands and thousands of years. They said, reverse the searchlights of the senses. Cut the sense telephone wires. Go back inside. Make your spine into a big magnet. And that feel the energy pulling back. Otherwise, you don't stand a chance. Imagine like a tortoise bringing its limbs in. This is the kingdom of God. It's within, as all the masters have taught. And so we energize the spine. We masters said the chakras are like doors. The energy is going out into the senses, into the world, or you can turn the door in through yoga, through hatha yoga, through mahamudra, through energization, through kriya yoga. He also said it's like flower petals, like the lotus petals, turn down. We try to turn those up. Turning down means going down in the senses, down and out. In yoga, we turn those lotus petals up, the lotus flowers up. Same with magnets. Think of outer magnets, the senses. We go like, wow, the senses are so strong. I can't fight them. Well, you can fight them. Get the bigger magnetism in the spine by magnetizing those bigger magnets, the chakras. Then you find your energy just starts going inside. You start experiencing the light. You start experiencing the power within you of those chakras. Kundalini starts lifting up, and you said, forget about everything else. I came for this life of seeking God within. And then as you come in, you feel yourself completely centered, and all your life revolves around that center. This is the moment to meditate deeply, meditate more, do more kriyas, and do energization, tense relaxing of the chakras. Do the higher kriyas. Look at the spiritual eye. At least meditate 5 minutes a day to change your awareness from outside to inside. And this is the thing. It's not enough to do puja. I'm just doing puja every day. I'm going to the mandir. You can't go right now, but I go and put money in the mandir. I go on pilgrimage. I listen to the discourses on the TV or whatever. It's just not enough. You've got to go inside and pull your energy back inside. There was a story of Master when he was teaching, and some of the students said, well, Master, teach us something esoteric, because we want the deeper teachings. And he says, okay, I'll teach you something esoteric. And he himself was just so deep. He would heal people from the dead, from the Shakti. He was the power of God within him. There was one man who was sick in bed, and someone asked him, I think it was Dr. Lewis, if he could help this man. And Master, he said, just a moment. And he said, let me pray for him. And it was like an explosion went out from him and went to the man who was sick. The man sat up and he was well. And this is the power of the gurus. If we can allow that power and Shakti to run through us, techniques plus devotion plus the guru's energy helps us to change ourselves. So Master said, I'll teach you something esoteric. So he starts talking about the nadis, irda, pingalas, shumna, various things, esoteric and yoga. After 5 minutes, everybody was asleep. You can't take it. You have to experience it. It's not enough to listen. It's not enough to believe. The church I was in was always believe. All you have to do is believe. I believe, but I just couldn't know. What am I believing? How can I do it? I want to do it myself. And so now, as we're doing our practices, I love this thought. As you energize, say, I'm seeking the kingdom of God. As you do Ananda Yoga, say, I'm seeking the kingdom of God. As you chant the Master's spiritualized chant, say, I'm seeking the kingdom of God. As you do Kriya, meditate, I'm seeking the kingdom of God. As you do every part, affirmations, visualizations, prayers, I'm seeking the kingdom of God. Don't just do it. Just say, oh, I'm praying for people. Why? Seeking the kingdom of God within. And so seek ye first the kingdom of God means meditate first, energize first, do yoga first, affirm first, visualize first, pray first, get an attunement first, do your devotional practices, chant first, then with that consciousness, that uplifted vibration, that centeredness, that power of God, the grace of God, go out, do your duty. But first, seek ye the kingdom of God, and you will realize that everything works out. I was going to end with this wonderful story of St. Anthony of the Desert. He lived in Egypt. He lived in a tomb. I mean, you ask people for 60 years, you ask people, have an hour of silence. Oh, I got to talk. I've got to talk. I remember one lady, we were doing a week-long retreat in silence, and a Kriya Bomb retreat. And she says, Dhyana ji, the only thing is, I have to talk. You don't know me. I talk all the time. I said, I think you're going to like silence. No, I have to talk. Take some time in silence. At the end of the week, we couldn't get her to talk. She was so happy. First, she tried to keep whispering to me. I said, no talking. Then she said, no talking. So St. Anthony was in a tomb for 60 years. My God, you can't get people to meditate for 3 hours. 60 years calling to God. Master said he realized God. He said, remember that. He lived to be 120 years old, and he realized God. And St. Anthony would call out to God in his depths of his soul. And one day, what happens? Satan comes. God didn't come. Satan comes and tests him, just like he tested the Buddha. And Siddhartha, who became the Buddha, finally said he was tempted by all kinds of things all around him and circumstances. And he finally, he rapped on the ground 3 times. He said, Mara, I have conquered you. And this is the mantra of the yogi. I have conquered you. I'm gone back inside myself now. And so this is how we have to live. So St. Anthony, he was praying, and so the Satan comes to him. And he says, you must give up God. You must give up Christ. He doesn't know you. He's nowhere around. And this is, people think that God isn't here. He doesn't hear your prayers. He doesn't give a darn about you. But think again. And St. Anthony said, I will not give up God. I will not give up my sadhana. I will not give up my belief. I don't care what happens. And this is the devotee has to say every day, I will not give up my sadhana. I will not give up my practices. I will not give up my guru. And so then Satan says, okay, you want to stay there? I'm going to crack the tomb. I love this story. It's a warrior story. He starts cracking the tomb. And these things are falling everywhere. And this is how life is going. Things are going to be falling everywhere. And then St. Anthony keeps praying to the Lord, come to me, come to me. And then finally Christ appears. And the vision of Satan dissolves. And St. Anthony, he looked at Jesus and he says, Lord, Lord, why didn't you come before? Isn't that the prayer everybody has? Why didn't you come before? And he said, Anthony, I was just the same with you. I was with you. And if you go inside, you realize God is with you, but nobody cares. Nobody goes inside. He said, I was just the same. Basically saying, seek God first, no matter what happens. God will be just the same with you. But you have to go inside. That's where we go and we find God. We find the gurus. And we find out who and what we really are and what this life is about. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and all these things. Health, wealth, friends, everything will be added unto you. I want to end with this technique for today, a visualization that Swamiji gives. Close your eyes and listen. He says, build a mental bonfire. You can do this today, tonight, as you feel, but try to do this a little bit now. Think of all your possessions, your house, your furniture, your clothing, your jewels, your kitchen, your books, your recordings. Throw these one by one into the mental bonfire until all are consumed. Meditate on your freedom, not on your loss, but on your identity, non-identity with any possession in your life. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.